guys, I'm here today to talk about my most anticipated book releases between the months of January and March. I love researching these videos. I love doing them, sort of. What I don't love is there's a lot of edits. So this won't be as casual as most of my videos because I'll have to keep like referring back to what the hell the book's about, because I've got 25 books to talk about here and there's no way I'm going to remember what they're all about. So please forgive me if you do not like lots of edits, because this video will have a lot of edits anyway. And also forgive me, I have the light on because it's dark outside, so we're going to just have to deal with the fact that I look a bit orange. What can you do? So, like I said, I've got 25 books to talk about. Very, very excited. I think I counted, and 10 of them are by authors I've read before, and 15 are by new to me authors. A lot of those are debut novels or short story collections, which is a nice mix, I think, because I do really like returning to authors I've enjoyed, but I'm also a massive fan of trying new authors' work. These books sound brilliant. I always find the first quarter of the year is excellent for new releases. One thing I'm very sad about is that I don't think I have a single non-fiction. I love non-fiction and I read so much of it now, but I find it much harder to find out about non-fiction releases compared to fiction. So do feel free to like hit me up with any non-fiction releases wherever you are in the world that you know about in the first few months of the year or even after. Also, the majority of these are UK release dates. There are a few that are North American release dates because they're being published by indie presses, and like I think it's unlikely they'll be picked up in the UK, so I will just buy them when they come out in North America. I think that's all the like little bits of information you need in advance. So I'm going to mention each month, I'm going to mention the books by authors I've read first. And I'm not going to bother telling you the release dates because I'm too lazy, guys. They're coming out in that month, so you can probably find them at your local bookshop or ask your library to get hold of them. So the first one is The Art of Falling by Danielle McLaughlin. She is an Irish author, and I read her short story collection Dinosaurs and Other Planets a couple of years ago because Jen was raving about it. I'm pretty sure Jen actually bought it for me and I really enjoyed it. I thought, Albus is just moving around the room, so sorry if you can hear that. They're, I think, all realist stories. Maybe one or two were a little bit weird. And they're predominantly focused on sort of working class voices, very slow, very realist. I really enjoyed them. I thought her writing style was beautiful. So I knew whatever she released in future I would pick up. And I always like it when someone who's written a really great short story collection has their first novel out. I think it's really exciting. This one sounds very literary in that, like, if I tell you what the plot is, it sounds a bit plotless. I'm fine with that. I think we're following a woman whose marriage has just crumbled, and she is involved in an art exhibition, and then these two people like walk into her life and bring up things in her past. And that's what I know, but I will be picking it up because I love her writing style, and I highly recommend looking into her short story collection if you haven't already heard of it. The next one is Luckenbooth by Jenni Fagan. So I have read, what's it called? The Sunlight Pilgrims by Jenni Fagan, and I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed it. This one sounds brilliant. It's her third novel. I haven't read her first, which is The Panopticon, but this one sounds so good. So it starts in 1910, and I think this might be a bit fabulous because it says that the devil's daughter rose to this house, rose as in a boat, and this house is 10 Luckenbooth, and it is set in Edinburgh because, if you don't know, Jenni Fagan is a Scottish writer. And you then follow this house over 100 years, and I think it's sort of cursed, and you follow all the people who live in this house. I love multi-character stories, and I love stories that move through time, and this also sounds like it's got a slightly spooky gothic edge to it, so I'm on board. The rest of the books coming out in January are by new to me authors, and the next couple I've heard so much about. The first one being Luster by Leilani. This came out a couple of months ago in North America, so I've heard so much buzz about it, but it doesn't come out until January in the UK. This is about a young black woman who meets an older white man, I believe, and she starts having a sexual relationship with him, knowing that he's married, and then she moves into his house to carry on that relationship. Like, his wife is completely aware, and it's about how that works. I think she gets quite close to his daughter, who I think is adopted and also black and similar to her age. So it's about like I don't know, like the levels of power in this group of people, and people are saying it's really readable, really fascinating, and had them thinking loads, so I'm very intrigued by this one. The next one is Memorial by Byran Washington. So I've wanted to read a lot by Byran Washington since it came out because that's a short story collection. I've heard really great things about it, and I've heard mixed things about Memorial, but I still want to pick it up. So again, this is one that's already come out in North America but will be coming out in January in the UK. So this follows a gay couple. So we follow a black man and a Japanese American man, and I believe the Japanese American man hears that his father is seriously ill back in Japan, and so he flies to Japan to go see his father. At the same time, his mother, I think, has flown to visit them. So then his mother gets left with his partner whilst he is in Japan, and the two men have a really tumultuous relationship. A lot of people have said that's one of the things they struggled with, that there appears to be no real reason why these men are actually together, but it's about this period of time and how the one man gets on in Japan, seeing his father, I think, and then how the other man copes with his mother-in-law. And I think there's also lots of really great food writing in this one. I've heard lots of people rave about that. So I just really want to try Byran Washington's work out. It's definitely going to be one of the first short story collections I pick up in the year, but I also want to give Memorial a go. So the next one is a book I've had on pre-order for about a year now. It's been out in Australia for a year or two, and that is The Yield by Tara June Winch. But it keeps moving publication date in the UK because of COVID, obviously, so it's now due to come out in January. I really hope it is, because it was my most anticipated release of 2020, and I'm still super excited about it in 2021. So Tara June Winch has, I think, some short story collections and maybe novellas out, which I'd really love to try, but I'm very excited. This is her first book that's been published in the UK. So Tara June Winch is a Wiradjuri writer. I'm really sorry if I've not said that very well. I've tried to look it up, but all the people who I've found say it really quickly, which I find really difficult to then learn how to say it myself. This book is about a man who dies, and he wanted to pass on his Wiradjuri wisdom before his death, and his granddaughter Poppy comes back from Europe. She's lived there for 10 years in order to attend his burial, and she is really angered at the racism that her family has endured, and she wants to try and protect their land rights, because I think when she arrives there is a threat to their land rights, and so she stays to try and get involved in this. I've heard phenomenal things about this book, and I feel like it could be a 5-star read for me, so I'm incredibly excited for it. And then we have another Australian release, and that is A Room Called Earth by Madeleine. The UK cover of this is absolutely beautiful, so if that doesn't make you want to read it, I don't know what will. And this is written by a neurodiverse author about a neurodiverse character, and I think this is focused around quite a small section of time. We follow this young woman as she arrives at a party, and the way she views the party is very different from the other people there, and we follow her as she moves through this party, and I think maybe makes a connection with a man there, and we follow her thought processes through this evening. I think it sounds really interesting. The reviews I've heard of it are really positive, and I definitely want to make more of an effort to read books by neurodiverse authors about neurodiverse people, so do please feel free to give me recommendations down below. The next one I've seen quite a few people include on their most anticipated releases videos because it sounds absolutely brilliant, and that is We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayyan. This sounds excellent. So again, this is set across 2 time periods. I love books that are set against different time periods and locations. So we follow a man in 1960s Uganda as his life starts to shift dramatically during the political turbulence of the time, and then we follow another man in present day London as, after he feels this sense of emptiness, he decides to go back to Uganda, and when he arrives there he starts to uncover secrets which I'm guessing will be linked back to the 1960s story. I love books that do this. The cover is beautiful, and again it's getting lots of buzz in advance of its release, so I'm very intrigued by it. The last January release I have on my list is White Ivy by Susie Yang. This one sounds really intriguing. So we follow a woman called Ivy Lynn. She's a Chinese immigrant and she lives in Boston, and she has quite a complicated relationship with her parents. Her grandmother teaches her to shoplift, which sounds fascinating, and we follow her through her life as she has this complicated relationship with a blonde-haired white boy, and then we come back to her story and there's loads of twists. This plot sounds really vague, but again I've heard really good things about this one, and I'm intrigued by the vagueness of the plot, and I've heard the writing style is like crystalline and beautiful. Okay, so now we're on to February, and I have 3 books by authors whose works I've previously read in February. The first of those is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. So I absolutely loved The Miseducation of Cameron Post by this author, which came out years ago, but I only read last year. And I was really intrigued when I saw she had a new book coming out, but I was really surprised by the plot because it sounds completely different to The Miseducation of Cameron Post, but I still love the sound of it. So this, I think it's set in present day, but it's set in an all-girls boarding school, and in the early 1900s there were the 2 girls who were in a queer relationship based on their obsession with this memoir, and then they were found murdered, I think, in the woods together. And all these years later, the school has been reopened so that a film crew can come in to make a film about those events, and shit gets weird. So I don't know if this is going to be like fantastical or horror, because The Miseducation of Cameron Post is like a YA contemporary, so I don't fucking know. But Sarah Waters has raved about this one. Sarah Waters, if you don't know, writes gothic, historical, queer fiction. She's one of my fave authors. So if she has blurbed a book, it's probably going to be amazing. The next one is The Memory Theatre by Karin Tidbeck. So I have previously read Jagannath by this author, which is a wacky short story collection. I highly recommend it. I really want to reread that one actually, and do you know what? I might treat myself to rereading that over the next week or so. It's a very, very short book. It's published, I think, by Small Beer Press, which if you like wacky, weird, fantastical books, I really recommend checking them out. I'll link them down below. And I'd sort of say that if you like Alice in Wonderland, but for adults and twistier, but beautifully written, then you're probably going to like Jagannath. And I'm pretty sure that Karin Tidbeck is a Swedish author, that she translated it herself. So it's not in translation, but it's also published in Sweden in Swedish. So she's obviously multi-talented. So this one I am going to read the blurb because I literally cannot do this justice. It sounds phenomenal. I'm just going to read the start. In a world just parallel to ours exists a mystical realm known only as the Gardens. It's a place where feast never ends, games of croquet have devastating consequences, and teenagers are punished for growing up. For a select group of masters, it's a decadent paradise where time stands still. But for those who serve them, it's a slow torture where their lives can be ended in a blink. This sounds very much like her short story collection. And I think there is even a story in that collection which had a really fucking weird game of croquet. So I'm very happy to have that involved in the novel. Cannot wait for this one. The last one in February by an author I've read before is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. I'm sure like any fan of science fiction is going to have this on their anticipated releases list for 2021. Now, I absolutely love The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Another one I might reread this week because it brings me joy. However, I've read the 2 following books in this sort of interconnected series and I didn't love them. I felt that the second one just wasn't as strong. It was still quite closely focused, and I felt like the third one just felt like a collection of short stories, which I love, but it wasn't a particularly strong collection of short stories. This one I feel like I could really enjoy because it goes back to the original in a way. We're following 3 characters who I think are stranded together after something happens that stops traffic from entering one of the planets. So this one I'm hoping to find as much joy in as I did in The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. The next one is one that already came out in North America, but I knew it was going to be released this year in the UK, so I've waited. And that is, and I'm really rubbish at saying this, I think you say Bestiary, but I always want to say Bestiary, and that's by Ming Chang. This sounds phenomenal. So we follow 3 generations of Taiwanese American women who are haunted by the myths of their homeland in this spellbinding, visceral debut about one family's queer desires, violent impulses and buried secrets. And there's mentions of like one woman having a tiger spirit who lives in her body, holes in the backyard spit up letters penned by their grandmother, a brother tests the possibility of flight. So I think this is going to be a fabulous novel. And I feel like I used to read so much fabulous fiction in like 2015 and I really loved it. And then the last few years I've got way more into reading like realistic literary fiction, and I would like to try in 2021 to find my love for fabulous fiction again, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. And the next one I had Hannah from Let's Talk About Books Baby rave about because she had an advanced review copy of it, so I will link her video up here. I really love her channel. She started during lockdown. I highly recommend you go and check her channel out. So this is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. This is a love story about two young black people who I think live in southeast London. It says both are black British, both won scholarships to private school where they struggle to belong, and both are now artists. He's a photographer, she's a dancer. And it says this is an achingly beautiful love story and a potent insight into race and masculinity. I think this could make me absolutely sob based on the description, and Hannah said it had absolutely beautiful writing, and I think this is quite a short book, and I find that books that are quite short with beautiful writing usually have a really strong impact, so I'm really looking forward to this one. The next one is my exact type of like catnip book. So if I had to describe a type of book that will always make me want to read it, it would be young girls, coming of age, friendship, dark, and this book is that, and that is We Run the Tides by Vendela, Vida. So this is set in the pre-tech boom San Francisco. We follow these two girls who witness a violent event, but they disagree about what they saw. And following that, one of them disappears and people think she's been kidnapped. So you're following their loss of innocence, their coming of age, and like the darkness in their relationship. I love all these things. I think I will love this one too. And I love that it's set in San Francisco. I'm very excited about that. Another one that focuses on female friendship, I think this one might be quite a lot darker, and this is again a book based in London, is Nightshift by Kiare Ladner. This is about a woman who starts to work the night shift and she becomes obsessed with another woman who works the night shift near her. It says dark, sexy and frightening, Nightshift explores ambivalent female friendship, sexual attraction and lives that defy easy categorisation. London's stark urban reality is rendered otherworldly and strange as Maggie's sleep deprivation, drinking and flirting with Sabine gain a momentum all of their own. This one sounds really fucking twisted. I cannot wait to read it. The next one is Colo Hill by Neema Shah. This opens in 1972 Uganda when a decree is issued that says that all Asian Ugandan people have to leave Uganda, and we follow this married couple who have to flee and they have to leave their family business behind, so they like lose all their assets, and I think they end up being in London, and we follow their journey and what it's like for them to have to flee, and I think this sounds really intriguing and it has a beautiful cover too. The next one sounds fucking brilliant too, and that is Madame by Phoebe Wynne. So this follows a really eerie boarding school for girls. Again, this one is in Scotland, and a new teacher starts working there. She's a young woman and she teaches the classics, and she starts to uncover really dark secrets about the school, and she's trying to protect the girls that she teaches. I'm not sure if this one's going to get a little bit fantastical or if it edges more towards the gothic, but I think it sounds absolutely brilliant. This one's being compared to like Donna Tartt and Daphne du Maurier, which I don't know, like when people just choose really massive authors to try and sell a book, that worries me, but also I love Donna Tartt and Daphne du Maurier, so we shall see. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the last 8 books, which all come out in March, and 5 of these are by authors whose work I've previously read, which is very exciting. Also, the light has completely changed, so we now have really good lighting. I hope you enjoyed all the different tones my face has had in this video. So the first one is All the Murmuring Bones by Angela Slatter. So I read Of Sorrow and Such by this author. I actually listened to it on audio. It was a novella and I really enjoyed it. It was sort of like a cosy, witchy story. So it had some scary, violent stuff, but it also just felt cozy and comforting the whole way through. There was lots about female empowerment and the patriarchy. I loved it. And it reminded me, if you enjoy Juliet Marillier, I think you'd enjoy Angela Slatter. And her new book, All the Murmuring Bones, sounds even better because this one is linked to the Mer people. So I think it's about this family that have a deal with the Mer people and they have to flee for some reason, and I think some of the people involved are mermaids and some are witches. And if this wasn't Angela Slatter, I'd be like, it sounds a bit like it might be not for me, like a bit too plot heavy, maybe a little bit cheese. But based on the fact that I've read Of Sorrow and Such, and it was so beautifully written, really slow and cosy and comforting, I'm very excited for this one. Then we have Theft of Sunlight by Intisar Kanani. I pretty much can't talk about this because it is the sequel to Thorn by Intisar Kanani, which I read and loved in November, so I'll link my video where I spoke about it up here. Now, in Thorn, was a YA fantasy, but a really slow-paced YA fantasy. I felt like the last quarter got a bit too speedy and silly, but other than that I really loved the rest, and I was so happy when I realised there was going to be a sequel, so I cannot wait to get to this one. So if you enjoy slow-paced, character-focused, cosy fantasy, I really recommend starting with Thorn, because then you can move on to Theft of Sunlight pretty quickly. One that's probably on everybody's list is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. So I read Homegoing by this author. I always want to say Homecoming, it's Homegoing. I didn't love it as much as everybody else. I thought it was a really excellent concept, but I felt like at points the concept was lots better than the writing. I also felt like the last 3 stories in particular were nowhere near as strong as the sort of middle section. But it was her debut, and I thought her writing was good enough, the themes were really great, that I wanted to carry on reading whatever she wrote in the future. So this one, Transcendent Kingdom, I believe is a contemporary novel, and it follows a woman who I think is a biologist, and she's very heavily involved in the sciences, and a lot of her research is focused on the fact that her brother very sadly died from a drug overdose. I'm not sure if it was suicide or not, and she's trying to look into the science in the brain that goes into making somebody get involved in drug use, I think. Her mother is also struggling with really severe depression following the loss of her brother, and I think they are very involved in their religion and what this means for how they view their connection with their faith. So yeah, this one doesn't necessarily sound like a book that would draw me in, but I'm intrigued enough by this author's work to give this one a go. So if you have read it, I would love to know your thoughts, because I've heard mixed things but mainly positive, so I still want to give this one a go. The next one is Skyward In by Alia Whiteley. So I've read 2 of this author's books. I think she has 2 more which I haven't read. So the ones I've read are both novellas, and they're sort of weird and unsettling but really good. They're very slow, beautifully written, and quite dark and twisty, and I really enjoyed them. This one sounds quite different. So the previous ones are sort of fantasy based in our world but with some weirdness going on. I think this one is sci-fi. When I read the blurb it sounds pretty plotty, but I know that isn't really what this author does. So it says this is a thoughtful literary novel about conflict, identity and community, a fresh new perspective in speculative fiction from critically acclaimed author Alia Whiteley. This is about a conflict that's going on in somewhere called the Western Protectorate, and we follow the innkeepers of the Skyward Inn, and their peace is disturbed when a visitor comes there to ask for help and I think sanctuary. So we follow that story. It sounds intriguing. I'm very excited about reading this author's sci-fi work because I've previously enjoyed her other books. The next one is Hot Stew by Fiona Mosley. I absolutely fucking loved Elmet by this author. This one sounds completely different. So Elmet was her debut novel. It was longlisted for the Booker Prize. It may have even been shortlisted. It was a massive thing because she was very young, and it was absolutely beautifully written, and it was very rural, and it was about a working class family, and it was a very close focused novel, and I loved it. This sounds completely fucking different but also brilliant. This is set in Soho, and we focus around a brothel, and we follow this group of women. There's also a Russian billionaire who's somehow involved. We also follow lots of drug addicts who live in the area, and it's this big compilation of these characters, and it says it's a really interesting commentary on sex and money in modern times. Anything this author writes I'm going to read, but this sounds particularly brilliant. And then we have another weird and wacky short story collection, and that is Burning Girls by Veronica Sklanos. I probably said that wrong. So this author had a short story called Burning Girls that came out a few years ago, and I always wanted to read it because I heard really amazing things about it, but I could never find it online or on audio or anywhere just as a standalone. And she's now written this little collection, of which Burning Girls is the title story. This is supposed to be an excellent commentary on women, immigration and borders, and have fabulism mixed in. Also, look at that phenomenal cover. I'm very excited about this one too, as I am about all of them. Have you got that yet? And the next one sounds phenomenal. That is How Beautiful We Were by Mbulu Mbue. This is set in a fictional village in Africa, although I think Mbulu Mbue has roots in Cameroon, so it could be based on sort of politics from Cameroon, I'm not sure. This is a novel about this village that is suffering from environmental degradation because of American oil companies, I believe. And the villagers decide to fight back in quite a sort sort of drastic way, and it says it has devastating consequences for the generations that follow. And I think this is told through the voices of the children of those subsequent generations. How brilliant does that sound? I love anything that involves anything to do with the environment, whether that's wonderful things or sad things. I love books that go across time and characters, as we've mentioned, and I also love child narrators, as we've mentioned, so I think I could really love this one. And the last one is The Remove by Brandon Hobson. I love the sound of all of this author's books, but this one sounds particularly fascinating, so I think I might start with his newest book. So Brandon Hobson is an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation, and this is a novel about a family whose son died, and after the death of their son, they never really spoke about it. They all struggled in silence and separately. And this year they have an annual bonfire which is connected to their tribe, but also is like this annual celebration of the life of their lost son. And I think one of the daughters decides to try and bring the family together to actually discuss how they all feel, and it has devastating consequences. I love family dramas. I'm really trying to read more books by Native American writers. I find it much easier to find books by Indigenous Canadian authors than I do by Native American authors. So I love the sound of this one. Please feel free to recommend me more novels, like literary fiction novels by Native American authors, because I would love more recommendations. So those are all the books. I have no idea how long this video is. I know that I lost all my lipstick during filming it. That's how long it's taken me. I also know that it's lunchtime. I'm very hungry. And yeah, I hope you love the sound of these. I was already so excited about all these books, but I am like 100 times more excited after speaking about them to you guys. So I'd love for you to let me know, like, out of this list, if you have like a top 5 that you would like the sound of. That would be intriguing. I'd also love more recommendations based on the ones that I've mentioned, be they backlist or new releases. As I said, I need non-fiction recommendations, and also a gaping hole in this list and in all of my reading is translated fiction. I'm awful at reading translated books. It's something I really want to change in 2021. I find it really hard to hear about translated fiction books like in advance of their release, so please let me know any books you have on your list, and also publishers that you think are really good at publishing translated books. I know about Europa editions, but I don't really know about many more, so I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!